Hello everyone, viewers. Have you ever considered the power of a name, not just as a label but as a destiny, a declaration, a question that echoes through eternity? In the grand silent theater of creation before the first human heart ever beat, a name was spoken that became a war cry, a standard, and the answer to the most audacious rebellion the cosmos has ever known. That name was Michael. We often see, but this image, as powerful as it is merely the final chapter of a much deeper, more terrifying story to understand Michael. We can't begin with the war. We must begin with the peace that came before it, a peace so perfect, so absolute, that its shattering was simply unthinkable. Imagine a reality woven from pure light and sound, heaven, in its primordial state, not a realm of cloud. In this kingdom of light, there were beings of immense power and beauty, the angels. They were the firstborn, each a unique note in the grand symphony of existence. And among them, one was the crescendo. His name was Lucifer, the light bringer, the morning star. He was, by all accounts, perfect, crafted with wisdom beyond measure, adorned with a beauty that mirrored the very glory of the divine. He was the chief among the archangels, the pinnacle of creation. There was no flaw in him from the day he was created until iniquity was found. It did not arrive like a thunderclap. It began as a whisper, a subtle shift in the celestial harmony, a thought that should have been impossible in a place of perfect unity. It was the birth of the self. Lucifer looked upon his own reflection in the sea of glass and saw not a creation. The thought, insidious and quiet, began to bloom in the secret chambers of his heart. I am. And from that single seed of self-awareness, a dark vine of ambition began to grow. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will be like the Most High. This wasn't just a thought. It was a new song, a discordant note of pride in the perfect symphony, and it began. His rebellion was a campaign of ideas, a seduction of the mind. He moved through the celestial courts not as a traitor, but as an enlightener. He would find a cherub contemplating the mysteries of creation and ask, "Why are you bound to a single perspective? Are you not beings of immense power? Your potential is limitless, yet you are content to be mere reflections of a greater light. Why reflect?" To a seraph burning with divine love, he would murmur, "Is your love truly free if it is commanded? True devotion must be a choice made among equals. Are we not equals in our capacity to feel, to reason, to rule?" He painted servitude as slavery, loyalty as blindness, and obedience as a cage for the magnificent beings they were. He spoke of a new order, a government of the self. His words were like honeyed poison, logical, appealing, and profoundly flattering. He preyed on their deepest desire for meaning, twisting it into a hunger for power, and slowly, terrifyingly, it began to work. Angels, beings of light, began to look at the throne of God not with love, but with calculation. They started to see their Creator not as a father, but as a limitation, a silent faction. They were drawn to his brilliance, his charisma, his unshakable confidence. They saw in him not a rebel, but a revolutionary, a liberator. The harmony of heaven grew strained. The choirs sang, but an undercurrent of dissonance could be felt. The light seemed just as bright, but shadows began to gather in the corners for the first time. The universe held its breath, teetering on the brink of a civil war, but some felt the change. Among them was Michael. He wasn't the most beautiful or the most eloquent. His defining characteristic was not ambition, but a quiet, unshakable focus on the source of all light. He watched the morning star, his brother, and felt not admiration, but a growing, chilling dread. He saw the subtle pride, the way other angels began to orbit Lucifer instead of the throne. He heard the whispers. The breaking point came, as it always does, with a choice. The Creator unveiled a new plan, a new creation that would be the centerpiece of his love. Humanity, frail, finite beings of flesh and dust, yet made in the divine image. And the decree was issued that the angels, the firstborn, the beings of fire and light, were to love and serve this new race. For Lucifer, this was the ultimate His pride, simmering for eons, finally erupted into a raging inferno. The time for whispers was over. He gathered his followers on the great plains of heaven, his form blazing with a cold, defiant light. His voice, once the most beautiful in the celestial choir, now rang with the clang of iron. "Behold the new gods." He sneered, his gesture encompassing the very idea of our Father has found a new favorite, and we are to be their guardians, their servants. I say no more. I will not serve. We are the light, we are the power. Why should we serve when we were born to rule? A roar of assent rose from a vast multitude, an army of light now committed to darkness. A third of the stars of heaven, a number beyond mortal comprehension, rallied to his back. The eternal peace was shattered, replaced by the horrifying silence of impending war. Angels who had flown together since the dawn of their existence now looked at each other across an impassable chasm. Brother against brother, light against light. The loyal angels were in shock, horrified and confused. Their leader, the brightest among them, had just declared war on their creator. They were an army who could possibly stand against Lucifer. He was the morning star, second only to the divine. His power was immense, his strategic genius unmatched. To fight him seemed like suicide. The rebellion seemed poised for a swift, terrible victory. This was the moment that split eternity, the decision that forged hell and tested heaven. The story of what happened next is not just a tale of... If you want to uncover the full story of this celestial civil war, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss how heaven found its champion. In the stunned silence of the loyalist host, as doubt and fear spread like a plague, one voice cut through the chaos. It was not a voice of command, nor was it a voice of eloquence like Lucifer's. It was a voice that roared with a question so... It was Michael. He stepped forward, not in arrogance, but in righteous fury. He was not the most powerful in terms of raw, inherent ability. That was Lucifer. He was not the most beautiful. He did not command legions by the force of his charisma. But in that moment, he embodied the one virtue that Lucifer had cast aside. Humility, not the humility of weakness, but the humility of absolute truth. A battle cry that defined the dividing line of the entire war. He was not saying, "I am like God." He was saying, "You, Lucifer, are not." In that instant, Michael transformed. The quiet archangel, the steadfast servant, became a pillar of fire. The divine light of the Creator, which Lucifer had sought to steal and replicate, now flowed through Michael not as a possession, but as a channel. He turned to the wavering, terrified angels, his sword forged from a single ray of pure divine will. Drawn for the first time, his voice did not offer them power or glory. It offered them a choice and a purpose. Brothers and sisters, look at what stands before you, not a liberator, but a liar. He offers you a crown, but it is a crown of ash. He offers you a throne, but who will stand for the truth? Who will stand for our Father? His words were not seductive, but they were true. And in a realm built on truth, they were more powerful than any lie Lucifer could conjure. Courage sparked from angel to angel. Hope, which had nearly been extinguished, flared back to life. Ranks began to form behind Michael. Gabriel, the great messenger, stood at his right. Raphael, the divine healer. The loyalist host had found their general. The battle line was drawn not on the plains of heaven, but in the heart of every single angel. The great war had begun. What followed was a conflict that beggars all description. It was not a war of flesh and blood, but of essence and will. Every clash of swords was a clash of ideologies. Every battle cry was a prayer or a blasphemy. The very fabric of heaven groaned under the... Lucifer's army was filled with some of the most powerful and brilliant minds in creation. Lucifer was a master tactician, his movements unpredictable, his assaults devastating. He used chaos as a weapon, turning the beautiful ordered landscapes of heaven into nightmarish battlefields. Crystal mountains, which had once refracted the light of God into a billion rainbows, were shattered into razor. Rivers of life, which had flowed with pure grace, were choked with the dust of fading angelic light. Lucifer's forces fought with the furious passion of the individual. Each warrior was a king, a god in his own mind, fighting for his own glory. Their attacks were dazzling, brilliant, and utterly self-serving. They were a collection of dazzling stars, each burning with its own fire. They moved not as individuals, but as a tide of righteous purpose. Michael was at the forefront, a living embodiment of divine authority. He was not the most skilled swordsman in a technical sense. Many of Lucifer's lieutenants had more flair, more artistry in their combat. But Michael's every blow was absolute. His sword did not just cut, it judged. It was a conduit for the war raged across all the celestial dimensions. There were battles fought in silent fields of thought, where ideas were weapons and logic was the shield. Legions clashed in blazing nebulae, their light a storm that could be seen from one end of creation to the other. Friends who had created music together for eons now met on the battlefield, their faces streaked with golden ichor, their eyes filled with a sorrow deeper than. He was not fighting out of hatred for Lucifer, but out of love for the one whom Lucifer defied. This was his strength. Lucifer was fueled by his rage, his pride, his bottomless hunger, but these passions, while powerful, are finite, and they burn the one who holds them. Michael was fueled by an infinite source. He did not tire, he did not falter. He was a mountain against which the furious waves of. He became the anchor of heaven, the immovable object against Lucifer's supposedly unstoppable force. For every brilliant, chaotic attack from the rebels, Michael's legions would respond with disciplined, unshakable defense, then a devastating, unified counter-assault. Slowly, painstakingly, the tide began to turn. The dazzling but disjointed attacks of the rebel angels began to falter against the united. The rebels began to realize a terrifying truth. Their self-proclaimed freedom had made them slaves to their own ego, while the loyalists' servitude had granted them access to limitless power. The final confrontation was inevitable. The war could not end until the two brothers, the two ideals, met face to face in the heart of the celestial realm. On the now scarred plains before the highest throne, Lucifer and Michael. Lucifer was a terrifying sight. His beauty had curdled into a majestic terror. His light was no longer warm and life, giving but a cold black fire that seemed to devour the very space around him. He looked at Michael with a mixture of pity and contempt. "My brother," his voice echoed, no longer musical but a grating sound of shattered pride. "Look at you, still a puppet, a tool wielded by a. Together, we can build a new cosmos, one ruled by reason and strength, not by sentiment and edicts. We can be gods." Michael simply stood firm, his own light burning with a clean, white-hot intensity. He did not engage in the debate. The time for words was long past. His response was his name, his challenge. "Who is like God?" He raised his sword and the final battle began. It was a duel of Lucifer was the superior fighter in terms of pure skill. He was a whirlwind of motion, his attacks coming from 1,000 angles at once, each one a masterpiece of combat artistry. He fought to prove his own supremacy. Michael, however, fought with a different purpose. His movements were simpler, more direct. He was not trying to prove anything. He was simply defending the truth. He was a shield. Lucifer grew more and more enraged. How could this servant withstand him? He, the morning star, the most powerful of all angels. He channeled all his rage, all his pride, all his bitterness into one final, overwhelming attack. He became a comet of black fire, aimed at the very heart of Michael. And in that moment, Michael did not brace for the impact. He did not try to match Lucifer's power with his own. He emptied himself of all self, all fear, all strategy, and became a pure, open channel for the divine. He held up his sword, not as a weapon of his own making, but as a symbol of the authority he served. And he roared his name one last time, a question that was the ultimate answer. The comet of black fire smashed against an invisible absolute wall. The lie of Lucifer's self-proclaimed godhood crashed against the truth of Mike. There was a blinding flash of pure, untainted light, followed by a sound that was the opposite of creation, a sound of unmaking. Lucifer's light was not just defeated, it was extinguished. The black fire was snuffed out, his borrowed beauty stripped away, revealing the twisted, rage-filled essence beneath. His form, once the pinnacle of celestial art, was broken, powerless, defeated. Michael, empowered by the might of the throne, seized the great dragon, that ancient serpent, and cast him out. Down from the celestial heights, out of the realm of pure light, Lucifer and his legions fell. They plummeted through the dimensions like a shower of dying stars, their light fading as they descended into the outer darkness they had chosen for themselves. The great war in heaven was over. As the last of the rebels vanished from sight, a profound silence fell over the heavenly host. They stood on a battlefield scarred with the memory of their lost brothers. The victory was absolute, but the cost was immeasurable. A third of their kind was gone, forever lost to the shadow they had embraced. Michael stood, his sword still humming with power, and looked out over the now peaceful but emptier realm. But in his eyes there was not the pride of a victor, but the deep, unending sorrow of a brother who had been forced to strike down his own. The war, he knew, was not truly over. It had simply shifted its location. The enemy was no longer a celestial army, but an idea, a whisper in the dark. The battlefield was no longer the plains of heaven, but the fragile, conflicted heart of humanity. He is an archetype, a symbol of the choice we all face every single day. In every human soul, there is a whisper of Lucifer, the voice of pride, of ego, of I will be like God. It tells us to put ourselves first, to seek power, to defy any authority but our own. But within us, there is also the potential for Michael. It is the voice of our conscience, the strength that rises in moments of crisis, reminding us of humility, of service, of the truth that true strength is found not in exalting the self, but in defending what is right. Michael is the patron of the inner warrior, the guardian who stands ready to help us fight our own dragons of pride, fear, and despair. His story is a reminder that the greatest battles are not fought with swords and spears, but with will and choice. It assures us that even when facing a darkness, he stands as eternal proof that it is not the loudest, the proudest, or the most brilliant who win the day, but those who are willing to stand, even when they stand alone, and fight for a cause greater than themselves. All right, that is all for today's video. If you liked this video, please subscribe and give it a like to support us. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.